Tony Bennett appeared to be the kindest person in the music industry. He collaborated with Frank Sinatra and Lady Gaga, among others, but there was a sinister secret hidden behind those happy pictures. He harbored animosity for one singer for decades, and it tormented him every day. His closest buddies were unaware of the reality. Bennett ultimately broke his silence in 2021 as he was near death. This was more than just jealousy on the job. This had been kept a secret for more than 50 years and was harsh and personal. On August 3, 1926, Anthony Dominic Benedetto was born in Long Island City, Queens, at St. John's Hospital. For an Italian immigrant family that had previously relied on home births, it was the first time anyone in his family had been born in a hospital. This was a little but significant difference. In pursuit of a better life, his parents had traveled from Italy. However, they discovered poverty and ongoing hardship in New York. Coal stoves barely kept them warm in their cramped, chilly Astoria flat. Food was never assured, and Tony recalled later that there was no guarantee of a hot supper back then. Despite his long hours as a grocer in Astoria, Tony's father's health was precarious. He had a severe cardiac disease as a result of years of work and poverty. Additionally, the family suffered greatly from each setback in the absence of life insurance. Although the Benedettos were known for their tenacity, the neighbors also witnessed how John's illness and their ongoing financial needs kept the family on the verge of disintegration. Tragic events occurred in 1936 when Tony was only 10 years old. Anna was left to take care of Tony, his brother, and his older sister Mary after John Benedetto passed away at the age of 50. John Jr. the city was already on edge due to the Great Depression, and now the family was even more impoverished. Anna secured a job in a sweatshop as a seamstress, working long hours and earning little money while stitching piece after piece. Tony remembered instances when the landlord threatened to evict them or took away their furniture because they were unable to make their rent payments, which was a continual source of stress. They started having soup kitchens every week. Even though Tony's father's passing was tragic, it instilled in him a sense of humility and compassion that lasted a lifetime. Tony had an incident that year that demonstrated the remarkable nature of his skill. He was selected to perform at the Triborough Bridges July 11, 1936, opening when he was 10 years old. One of New York's greatest accomplishments was the $60 million bridge that linked three boroughs. A young boy stood on a huge platform and sang in front of an audience that included Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. Later, the mayor even gave him a pat on the head. Tony will never forget that moment, which demonstrated that his voice could lift him above the challenges of everyday life. He started working at the age of 13 in order to provide for his family. He started working as a singing waiter in Long Island City and Queens Italian eateries. Before taking the stage to sing for the patrons, he served spaghetti and pizza dishes while wearing a faded white blazer. Even at that age, his voice was deep and controlled, and it quickly became the neighborhood's talk of the town. Customers believed he was just a gifted young man, but in reality, each note he sung helped put milk and bread on the table at home. Later, Tony claimed that the eateries taught him more about people and music than any other place. He learned humility in the face of adversity and developed his natural conversational style as a result of the experience. Early on, Tony also displayed his artistic side. He got admitted to Manhattan's School of Industrial Art, which is renowned for developing up-and-coming artists and designers. He was well known at PS 141, even before high school, for being the class caricaturist, drawing professors and classmates with a keen eye. He had aspirations of becoming a commercial artist while attending the School of Industrial Art. He developed his discipline and his passion of art in Manhattan, surrounded by creative energy. And he later acknowledged that those years had influenced not only his painting but also his approach to music. Dreams, however, had to wait. Tony left school at the age of 16 in order to support his family. After landing a job at the Associated Press as a copyboy, he went on to work as an elevator operator and supermarket clerk. Every dollar mattered, even though the positions paid little. He continued to sing despite the grind. He fed a desire that hardship could not quench by performing at amateur evenings in local theaters and bars. Tony was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1944 when he was 18 years old. During the latter phases of World War II, he fought in Germany and France with the 63rd Infantry Division. He witnessed personally the brutality of the conflict. He performed with military bands when he could, giving soldiers who were experiencing the trauma some respite. Conflict in the Bulge left a lasting impression on him. Tony saw pals perish and villages decimated as over 19,000 American soldiers were murdered. He recalled the constant worry of being besieged by German troops and the chilly evenings spent in foxholes. He became a lifetime supporter of justice and peace as a result of these encounters. Tony had the opportunity to take music seriously after the war thanks to the GI Bill. He learned with Mimi Spear, a vocal teacher at the American Theater Wing School. Everything changed after she gave me one piece of advice. She advised him to learn from instrumentalists rather than singers. Tony created a unique technique after being influenced by jazz greats like Art Tatum and Billie Holiday. Although there was a lot of music in the smoky clubs of Greenwich Village in 1949, nobody could have predicted that one little stage would become the starting point for a legend. Under the stage name Joe Barry, Anthony Dominic Benedetto was battling through sets night after night in the hopes of a seemingly distant chance. Pearl Bailey then happened to enter the Village Inn by coincidence. She was already well known for her strength and warmth, and she paid great attention to his singing. He stopped her cold with his emotion and wording. She made a choice that night that altered his life. In order to put him in front of an audience that would finally see what she had seen in him, she asked him to begin her performance. In light of the sharply divided post-war entertainment industry, it was not just a gesture of goodwill, but also a brave move. In addition to sharing her stage, Pearl Bailey introduced him to those who may change the world through her connections. That one night started a series of events that would eventually lead him to meet Bob Hope. Bob Hope himself sneaked into a nightclub where Bennett was singing shortly after Bailey's endorsement. One of the most well-known entertainers in America, Hope had the ability to make or shatter careers. Later, Bennett recalled giving the performance his all without knowing who was watching. Hope did anything out of the ordinary when the set was over. He arrived backstage. "You have something very special," Hope said to the young singer. "You will be featured on my show." Few performers have heard the promise. For Bennett, it was the turning point in his life. Hope asked him to start his next concert at the Paramount Theater in New York, which has hosted performances by such titans as Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. It was like entering the past for a teenage vocalist just out of local clubs. Hope had one more recommendation before to that Paramount premiere. He informed him that Joe Barry was not a suitable name. Anthony Benedetto, his real name, was too long for the marquee. Hope immediately came up with a shorter idea that would stick in people's minds: Tony Bennett. Although it was a small modification, it had significant impact. The new persona offered openings in a field where a name may mean everything. Later on, Bennett would claim that Bob Hope was responsible for both that name and the career it enabled. The real tipping point came with the Paramount shows in late 1949. The auditorium was crowded with thousands of fans, and Bennett had to quickly learn how to deal with the kind of audiences that used to incite Sinatra riots. Although he acknowledged that it was frightening, he also claimed that those evenings taught him how to command a room, pace himself, and manage a performance. Record labels started to pay attention as his name became well-known nationwide. Not long after, Columbia Records made contact. He became one of the biggest music performers when he joined with the company in 1950. Bennett developed a distinctive style under the direction of producer Mitch Miller. He once claimed that Miller had taught him to sing with true passion rather than merely melody, to concentrate on each note and phrase. Bennett started a collaboration that would last for almost 60 years when he recorded at Columbia's studio on 7th Avenue. This resulted in the global sale of 50 million records and more than 70 albums. Because of You, released in 1951, was the first significant development. After being released in April, it gradually rose through the charts until it peaked at #1 on July 14. The incredible run that made Bennett a household name lasted for 10 weeks. He received a gold disc for the song, which sold over 1 million copies. And sending him into a frenzy of tours and onto TV screens, its genuineness resonated with audiences, and critics gave Bennett credit for bringing the beloved pop ballad back to life at a period when other genres were gaining popularity. Bennett demonstrated his flexibility that year when he recorded Cold Heart by Hank Williams. It was nearly unheard of for a pop singer from New York to perform a country song, but his rendition was impressive. Gold. It sold more than 1 million copies and remained at the top of the charts for 6 weeks. The recording was hailed by Hank Williams himself, who said it introduced his music to previously unheard audiences. Bennett demonstrated that music could transcend boundaries and bring listeners together with that song, bridging a cultural divide. Bennett then sang the song that would come to define him for decades in 1953. On October 24th, Rags to Riches stormed to the top of the charts and remained there for 8 weeks. Audiences welcomed it as an anthem of the American ideal because its lyrics, which were full of optimism and triumph, reflected the attitude of post-war America. After selling over 2 million copies, the song would go on to feature in movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas, solidifying its status in popular culture. Even decades later, according to Bennett, it was the song that fans asked for the most. Few people could match Bennett's remarkable 24 singles in the top 40 by 1965. He topped the charts year after year with hits like Just in Time, Blue Velvet, and Stranger in Paradise. Bennett explains his success simply by saying that he loved singing songs people remembered, and that was enough to keep him on top. Bennett's When Joanna Loved Me made it onto the charts even in 1964 when the Beatles were dominating American music, demonstrating his ability to withstand shifting tides. Tony Bennett's collaborations with jazz greats were revolutionary. He abandoned the safe, polished pop sound that had made him famous when he began recording with Count Basie in the middle of the 1950s. Stan Getz's sessions were particularly audacious. When Getz first heard Bennett improvise during rehearsal, his initial reluctance to play with a pop vocalist was altered. Even more shocking to the music industry was the partnership with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Bennett's soft voice and Blakey's harsh bop style were thought to be incompatible, but together they produced some of the most avant-garde jazz voices of the time. Bennett was the only pop vocalist who could swing like an instrument rather than merely singing over the band, according to Bobby Hackett, one of the best cornet players. These endeavors weren't merely tests. They signaled a radical change that jeopardized his financial success in the name of artistic integrity. His album, The Beat of My Heart, was released in 1957. Although Columbia Records cautioned him against it, it was his method of escaping the pop music industry. Jazz drumming titans Art Blakey, Chico Hamilton, and Joe Jones contributed their unique sounds to the record. The live recordings of the sessions, which included very few overdubs, captured the authentic spirit of jazz. Critics first wrote it off as being too experimental, and just 50,000 copies were sold in the first year, indicating low sales. However, its impact was much bigger than the figures. The band was joined on one track by Broadway's Lullaby, which was practically unheard of at the time. Frank Sinatra later praised the album and acknowledged that it taught him how to swing. Bennett and Count Basie recorded Bossy Swings in 1958, a year later. Bennett sings. Basie initially objected, claiming Bennett was too attractive for his hard-swinging band. That changed one evening at Birdland in New York when Bennett joined the orchestra and astonished the entire club with a rendition of Pennies from Heaven. In just 3 days that January, a complete 16-piece band recorded the album. Bennett and the horn section engaged in a lighthearted back and forth throughout the opening number Jeepers Creepers, which had never been tried on a commercial recording. In its first year, it sold over 250,000 copies, making it an enormous success. Bennett rewrote a lot of the vocal arrangements during the sessions, creating new melodies as the tape rolled, according to studio recordings discovered years later. Basie acknowledged that he thought the singer was genuinely a member of his band on this album, which was the only one with vocals. The song that would define his career then emerged. Bennett recorded Leave My Heart in San Francisco at Columbia's 30th Street studio on January 23, 1962. He had almost missed it. After he deemed this song too sentimental, it had sat on his piano for 8 months. He had laryngitis and was hardly able to talk on the day of the session. In order to accommodate his strained voice, the orchestra had to drop the pitch twice. However, he gave a performance that made the song famous in just 2 takes. The roughness in his voice that day contributed to its emotional depth. The record remained on the charts for 36 weeks after peaking at number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold over 1 million copies by 1963, earning him his first gold record. It received 2 Grammy Awards, including Record of the Year, which at the time was an uncommon distinction for a song with jazz influences. It became the official theme music of San Francisco in 1969. However, Bennett's fortunes quickly shifted along with the music industry. A new era began in 1964 with the Beatles' arrival. Bennett was pressured by Columbia Records to adjust to the dominance of rock music on the radio. He grudgingly released Tony Sings the Great Hits of Today in 1970, which contrasted with his image due to its psychedelic album cover and Beatles covers. The project didn't work out. He acknowledged that the act of filming it made him physically ill. It was disregarded by rock lovers. He was left stuck between worlds because his devoted audience detested it. His once strong album sales fell apart. His personal life was equally chaotic as his voice was ignored in a world that cried out for something fresh. Bennett married 19-year-old art student Patricia Beach in 1952. Outside of New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral, a strange scene was created by the wedding. As if at a funeral, 2,000 women with black veils were in grief. Soon after, there were 2 sons. 1954's Danny and 1955's Day. But Patricia felt abandoned by Bennett's never-ending touring, and after 13 years of marriage, they had split up by 1965. When Patricia filed for divorce in 1969, citing his 4-year-old affair with actress Sandra Grant, the scandal grew even more intense. Bennett married Sandra in December 1971, the same year the divorce was finalized. His reputation as a clean-cut crooner was permanently changed, and his fans were surprised by the abrupt change. After a heated argument, he quit Columbia Records in 1972, which made matters worse. A 20-year collaboration came to an end when he refused their requests for additional rock songs. In 1975, he decided to launch his own label, Improv, after temporarily recording for MGM Verve's subsidiary and putting out just 2 albums. Despite producing 5 albums, including ones in which he collaborated with Bill Evans, the label failed by 1977 as a result of financial difficulties and inadequate distribution. Bennett was without a recording contract for the first time. His money fell apart. His lifestyle in Los Angeles, which he shared with Sandra, was much above his diminishing income, and the collapse of Improv left him heavily indebted. Due to enormous amounts of unpaid taxes, the IRS threatened to take his house in 1977. While he was getting ready to sing at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco that same year, his mother, Anna, passed away on Thanksgiving night. He fell into a profound despair as a result of the loss, and cocaine became his escape. His drug use almost killed him, Sandra subsequently disclosed. He had become a shadow of his former self by the late 1970s, putting on little shows in Las Vegas in order to make ends meet. Bennett was horribly close to death in 1979. He overdosed on cocaine while taking a bath because he was so overwhelmed by debt, sadness, and addiction. Sandra discovered him unconscious in the overflowing tub. Before she hurried him to the hospital, she was able to revive him by performing chest compressions. He subsequently spoke of the incident as a near-death encounter, claiming to have seen a golden light that brought him serenity. He believed that his awakening was a sign of divine intervention and a second opportunity. It became the pivotal moment that drove him to strive for his comeback and completely stop using narcotics. Tony Bennett's career hit its lowest point in 1979. He was drowning in debt at the age of 53 and almost died from a drug overdose. The IRS threatened to seize his home because he owed them $2 million in overdue taxes. Calling his sons Danny and Day in desperation, he said, "Look, I'm lost here. My music doesn't appear to be appealing to anyone." The fact that Danny and Day had played in the defunct rock group Quacky Duck was what caused the call to come as such a shock, and his pals from the farm. On paper, nobody would have thought that they would save a legendary singer. However, Danny soon discovered that although he lacked a musical voice, he had a keen economic sense, and his father was talented but lacked sound financial judgment. Danny relocated Tony back to New York and started reducing spending right away. That choice would serve as the foundation for one of the biggest comebacks in the history of entertainment. Danny took a daring and unexpected approach to his father's career. He pulled Tony away from the outdated Las Vegas image rather than following the latest trends. In order to attract younger audiences who had never seen American standards played live, he booked him at small theaters and colleges. Danny reunited his father with Columbia Records, the label that had released him in 1971 and 1986. However, Tony was in complete creative control this time. His first charting album since 1972 was The Art of Excellence, the first album from this agreement. In order to reach completely new audiences, Danny also arranged partnerships with strange groups such as rock groups like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. By 1990, Tony Bennett's career was back on track and the IRS obligation had been paid in full. Despite his difficulties in the 1970s, Tony continued to pursue his passion for jazz. He released the Tony Bennett Bill Evans CDs in 1975 after collaborating extensively with pianist Bill Evans. Evans' nuanced playing brought out some of Tony's most contemplative and elegant performances, revealing a side of Bennett that few had before seen. They recorded together once more because of how well they clicked. In 1977, although these sessions didn't sell well at the time, critics commended them for their closeness and honesty. Despite being disregarded at the time, Bennett's collaborations with jazz luminaries like George Barnes and Ruby Braff would come to be regarded as some of his finest work. Bennett shocked the music industry in 1994 when he made an appearance on MTV Unplugged at the age of 68. Instead of classic crooners, the evening was recognized for grunge and alternative bands. However, the performance ended up becoming the second highest rated episode in the history of the show. With over 1 million copies sold, the live album achieved platinum status. It also took home the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 1995. Only 4 live albums have ever received that distinction. There were some noteworthy duets in the concert with Katie, Elvis Costello, and Lang. Additionally, Bennett's unvarnished voice brilliantly encapsulated the essence of the act when he encouraged the crowd. Let's do this without a microphone. Bennett's personal life took an unexpected turn away from the stage. He wed Susan Crowe in 2007, who was 40 years his junior. It was like fate that brought them together. In the 1960s, he had first met her parents. When Susan was conceived by her mother, she was 19, and he was almost 60 when they first met in the 1980s at a performance. Following 20 years of courtship, she was elected president of his fan club, and on June 21, 2007, they were married in a secret ceremony in New York. Susan was 48, and Bennett was 81 at the time. He acknowledged that at first it had been difficult to ignore the age difference, but he claimed they quickly discovered that they had so many things in common that it didn't matter. She took care of him after he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and stayed by his side until his last years. Duets, an American classic, was released by Bennett in 2006, the year he turned 80. In its first week of release, the album sold over 2,000 copies and debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Paul McCartney, Elton John, Barbra Streisand, Stevie Wonder, Bono, Tim McGraw, and Billy Joel were all on the record. In contrast to numerous duet albums, Bennett and his partners recorded every song live. The CD demonstrated that even in today's music industry, American standards might be brilliant. Bennett published Duets de Verzine Sauve Saint Island in 2011, which was 5 years later. He made history by becoming the oldest living artist to debut at the top of the Billboard 200 at the age of 85, featuring performances by Lady Gaga, Mariah Carey, Norah Jones, John Mayer, Aretha Franklin, Carrie Underwood, and a posthumous duet with Amy Winehouse. The album sold 179,000 copies in its first week of release. Their rendition of Body and Soul, which was Winehouse's last recording before she passed away, was incredibly poignant. The success of the album, according to Danny, was historic, demonstrating that his father's creative abilities had never diminished. Bennett and Lady Gaga collaborated once more on Cheek to Cheek in 2014. With 131,000 copies sold in the first week, he achieved another #1 album at the age of 88. George Gershwin and Cole Porter were among the composers who contributed jazz standards to the project. The performance at Lincoln Center was the first to be streamed in 4K, and their tour and the PBS program Cheek to Cheek Live became cultural events. The album demonstrated that jazz still has a place in the contemporary era and yielded 2 #1 hits on the Jazz Digital Songs chart. Bennett received 20 Grammy Awards over his career, including the 2001 Lifetime Achievement Award. From his 1962 Grammy for I Left My Heart in San Francisco until his final Grammy in 2022 at the age of 95, he was the only performer to win Grammys in 50 years. His second collaboration with Lady Gaga, Love for Sale, won the award for Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album. He defied industry standards regarding age by winning the majority of his Grammy Awards after turning 60. Tony was up in Astoria, Queens, and he and Susan established the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts there in 1999. With 250 pupils, the school first started in 2001. In 2009, it relocated to a permanent location. It continuously maintained high graduation rates and provided top-notch facilities including dance and art studios, as well as a 750-seat concert theater. Bennett's conviction that arts education had the power to transform young lives was symbolized by the school. The public was made aware of Bennett's 2016 Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2021. His family had not shared the news for 5 years. He amazed his physicians by performing brilliantly during 90-minute concerts despite his sickness. Bennett's neurologist clarified that although he struggled with object recognition, his musical recall was still strong. Even though Martin Scorsese had used his music in masterpieces like Goodfellas, Lady Gaga subsequently disclosed that he had always disapproved of the way Italians were portrayed in his film. Bennett's last album, Love for Sale, was released in the same year that he turned 95. It was an homage to Cole Porter, who became the oldest person in history to put out a new album. The album set a new record for the 59 years between it and his first top 10 release in 1962, and it debuted at #8 on the Billboard 200. Lady Gaga was moved to tears during the emotional sessions as she witnessed her friend, who was ill, perform amazing vocals. At the age of 96, Tony Bennett died quietly in Manhattan on July 21, 2023, only 2 weeks away from turning 97. In his final years, he won 19 competitive Grammys, published more than 70 albums, and sold over 50 million records. From his early days as a singing waiter in Queens until his last concerts in 2021, his family recalled him as a man who always found delight in singing. He was hailed as a champion for the cause by the Alzheimer's Association, mentioning that he kept inspiring people with his voice and his love even in his latter years.